Welcome to the Royal Astronomical Society in London. I'm Nick Shilton from Prog magazine, and I'm delighted to be here to talk to Greg Spawton and David Longdon and to artist Sarah Ewing about the new Big Big Train album, Grand Tour. After a series of albums principally about people and places in England, Grand Tour sees Big Big Train go lyrically beyond the shores of England and venture into continental Europe and specifically Italy. What prompted this?
I think we've done, looking back, we've done almost 10 years of music where most of the songs were kind of rooted in the English-British landscape and people and history. And I think we felt it was time that we moved on a little bit. And we started planning our future touring activities, and that included Lorelei, and played last year. And also we're playing States and Canada and continental Europe next year. So we began to think, as we were talking about the new album or the next album, that maybe it would be fun to kind of take the songs to other locations as well. So that became the sort of concept that we began to talk through. And then at some stage, I think you mentioned the idea of the Grand Tour. And I think we were, that became the sort of identity under which we created the album. I think we were slightly reluctant to continue with that to album completion in terms of the title because of associations with well-known car shows and things. But it's a long-standing term, and for us, the album's kind of mostly about travel, broadening the mind, and learning things and knowledge from travelling. And so we decided actually we'd stick with our guns and stick to the Grand Tour identity.
We would we're branching out with our live shows. That's something that is a big part of what we want to do, and so it encompasses that aspect too. It allows us to write about travel, and people write about what they know, and so that's fed into it as well. So.
And do you feel that taking Big Big Train lyrically outside England has influenced the music for Grand Tour?
I would say, I think we've got our own musical DNA, which is pretty strong, and we've obviously there have been some changes to the music, but I'm a little bit wary myself of. I hate the term cultural appropriation because I think mankind's at its best when we're the melting pot of cultures and ideas. But I think the danger, if we were, many of the songs are set in Italy, and if we'd have sort of tried to source Italian folk music or something as an influence, I think it could have sounded like a pastiche, really. Yeah. So I think we stuck with our guns musically, made some changes as we do organically with the music. But no, I don't think the settings of the song particularly influenced our musical direction.
When I was researching for something like the Florentine, for example, I did actually research Italian Renaissance music and look for kind of rhythms and instrument textures, but it didn't work. It wasn't what I was looking for really. But I did check it out, but it didn't seem to. It didn't get very far. Yeah.
So how do you feel that the band's music's developed since the last set of albums, Folklore, Grimspound, The Second Brightest Star? How have you developed the music, do you think, or not, for Grand Tour?
There's been a conscious effort, I think, to develop the music. We tried to do something, we tried to push ourselves, we tried to stretch and reach. So the new album is very much, it's quite a dense record in terms of there's a lot of depth to it. And you can go as deep as you like. You can listen to it just for pleasure on the surface. But if you want to delve into the work, there's a lot of meat, on the bone to get your teeth into, to exhaust that metaphor.
And would you say that both of music and the lyrics?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've. I mean, this is as good an album as we can make at this time, in my opinion. And certainly we've looked to stretch ourselves a bit. I mean, we're very comfortable. We said this before. We'll say it again. We're very comfortable being a progressive rock band. Absolutely. It's a very broad field of music, so we don't feel constrained by that identity. We're not seeking to, suddenly become a heavy metal band or a folk band or whatever. But we'll go wherever we want to go, and we certainly push things as hard as we can, I think, on this album.
Oh, yeah, we're trying to expand our horizons in every sense, musically, with what we do, and trying to make the best music, best product that we can.
And lyrically, you've certainly expanded your horizons. And as I've observed recently in a column for Prog magazine, lyrics seem to be of far greater importance to some bands than others. I'd say you clearly fall into the former category, but how important are lyrics to you?
I mean, we've always said, there's lots of instrumental music on the album, but we're a song-based band primarily, and songs are a combination of music and words. And we're not the sort of band where the words are secondary to the music. You know, they're both really important to us. So we don't nip down the pub a couple of weeks before the vocals go down to write stuff on the back of a beer mat. It's not like that for us. We spend a long time researching and writing and sort of fine-tuning the words, because we want the final product to speak of our music and also our thoughts.
Speak from my own background, I'm a singer-songwriter, so people like Bob Dylan, Pete Townsend, very good lyricists, and that's important. People like Paul Simon, that's part and parcel of it. You can listen to it as a piece of music if you wish, and it's very pleasant and it will entertain you. It might be catchy or it might be challenging, whatever. But at the end of the day, we write songs that have things that have substance and something to say. So that's where we're at. In fact, a lot of the time when we're researching things, it's finding that way to tell the story. It's finding the angle, and eventually things fall into place, and the narrative happens. But that's just part of it. With Paddy McAloon.
Yeah, it's a Hamill,
absolutely. It's important. I think I have to say, when I'm listening to music as well, if the lyrics aren't really up to that much, I do tend to switch off a bit. If they're not good. But each to its own. If you're writing pop songs or something like that, and the message is "I'm young, I'm pretty" or whatever, then great. There's nothing wrong in that. But prog's certainly neither.
For some reason, we're not able to write that lyric.
That's right. We can't. It doesn't wash with us. No, that's
given all the effort that you put into lyrics and research, how important is it to you that listeners put the same effort into listening to the lyrics?
They don't. No, we just write them. We write them and we put them out there. It's entirely up to the listener what the listener does with it. We can't go around and police it. Come on, you've not done your homework on that.
We present the music in a way that it can be appreciated at every depth. So, the vinyl is probably the best way of reading the lyrics and the stories behind the songs. Again, the CD's got a big booklet this time, but I'm very conscious that people are busy and they listen on trains on the way to work, on Spotify or whatever. So, we're happy for people to appreciate our music in whatever works for them, whatever way works for them. It's great if they go into the layers, but if they decide that they just like the tunes, that's cool too.
And there's also things like, you mentioned reading the lyrics from a piece of vinyl. Obviously, that's quite a nostalgic thing for that's how we kind of listened to records when we were younger, immersed in the gatefold.
Yeah, totally.
And but from my daughters, for example, if they were thinking about lyrics, they might look at a lyric video or something like that accompanies a song. They'd probably get it rather than, I don't think they've ever sat with a gatefold and poured over it. Certainly not like we used to.
And which comes to each of you first, music or lyrics, and which do you find more challenging to write?
Both, in terms of they come when they come. They are, it's always happening. The channel's always open. It's always coming. I mean, this morning coming down here on the train, I've got lyrics going on. There's all sorts of stuff.
We were texting each other. We were coming in trains from different directions, and we were kind of describing the landscape. I know. And about halfway through, I thought this will be a song by the end of the journey. So it doesn't. It never stops. From my point of view, it's often a title that I start with.
Titles are good, aren't they?
Yeah, titles give you, they don't give you the angle, David was mentioning the angle of a song, but they do give you an idea.
It sets the scene.
Sets the scene.
Or it invokes something, it brings something. It's like an ignition point, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So I've got, like you have, a book of titles that future songs will be attached to.
Yeah, we like things that kind of command attention. Like a good title for a song it's a bit like having the destination on the front of the bus. You kind of know where you're going with it. You know, it means something. It strikes a chord, quite literally. Yeah.
You've both written several songs separately for Grand Tour. How easy or otherwise do you find it then to fit each song within the overall concept?
It's easy because we talk every day almost.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
So when we're writing, he knows what I'm writing about and I know what he's writing about. So it's a sort of continual few months of development. And if we're struggling with some songs you need wrestling to the ground, don't they?
Yeah,
And
they do,
we'll talk each other through that sort of struggle, and be a listening ear, I suppose. But no, because we'll establish the parameters of the album to start with. We'll then tweak that as we go. I think originally when we first discussed it with Sarah, I think the original plan was to perhaps try and follow the route of the sort of 17th century, 18th century Grand Tour. But we found that was holding us back a little bit. It was kind of making us write songs about subjects that we hadn't really identified.
There are a few gaps in there.
Yeah, so we thought actually it will just be what it is. It'll be songs that are out there.
And we've all said that we serve the song, we do, but also the songs need to serve the flow of the album. Yeah. That's something that is important, especially within progressive rock music, because lots of progressive rock fans take the whole thing into context rather than just isolated pieces of music.
So how did you ultimately decide which characters and places to feature and the itinerary that you chose for the Grand Tour? Was it essentially just to ensure that it flowed as one piece of work?
I think we wanted to have locations that would. I mean, there wasn't a definitive route for the Grand Tour. It kind of, there was a starting point, and there were some particular places that people always visited. But it was a flexible, it was a movable feast. Yes. So we weren't hidebound by that. We just thought, actually, what are we interested? We're writing songs outside of England. What are we currently interested in? And that would then fit into the concept rather than the other way around.
And you've ended up going long on Italy.
Yeah, we have, yeah, and that's as it is this time. It could have been any other country, I suppose, but it just appeared to us at this particular point that was kind of where we were.
Although the Florentine is about Leonardo da Vinci, of course, is Florentine. The song's actually set in France. So again, it's people with Leonardo. He was at the time he was working for the French king, and towards the end of his life, and also with the Byron and Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, they were in exile. They were exiled from England. They couldn't go back because of scandal and things like that. So they were out there. They were doing they're part of the whole Grand Tour thing, but it was very much a different kind of exile. People not in their own environment, working. That's again a metaphor for that, isn't it? Like going out of your comfort zone, going to strange places and interacting.
And were there people and places that narrowly didn't quite make the cut for this album that might feature on a companion album, perhaps in the style of The Second Brightest Star or elsewhere?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but we'd like to continue it, I think, won't we? There's things that we'd like. There's stuff that we'd like to readdress. I'm not sure about in terms of a companion thing. It needs to be something solid, as Grand Tour is solid.
Yeah, I think the chances at this moment are quite high that there'll be a second album in this vein, but it won't be. It'll be another full-on studio album. It won't be a kind of follow-up release. We don't have any. Second Bright Star was a kind of secret album because we managed to get some songs together, kind of along the way. But we don't have anything that we've got a couple of extra cuts which didn't quite fit this album, and I'm sure they'll appear at some stage, but we don't have any plans for
I don't think I've got any extra things. I think I once had Houndings. I mean, things like Ariel, that was a massive thing to write, comprising them lots of songs. So it's a song cycle. Yeah. So for me, it was just getting the angle, making the story flow. And,
I had one of my rare love songs, which I didn't end up playing anybody. But I quite like it, and it will come out at some stage. But it didn't quite fit this set of songs. And Nick also had another really cool instrumental piece, which we've got the drums and the brass down for, but we didn't deploy it on this album because again it didn't quite fit with the rest of the tunes.
And speaking of Nick, for the first time, this album's got one song solely written by him, and there's also some co-written material with him. How did that come about, that he's written for Big Big Train for the first time?
And whenever we start a writing project for an album, we generally put out a call to everybody and say, you know, is there anything that you'd want to submit? Rickard put forward a lot of material last time.
Yeah, he did.
It depends where they are in their musical lives, really. So Rickard's just done a couple of Gunfly albums, and so his sort of box of songs was a bit dry.
It's time as well. He's got a young family, so
Yeah,
all that there's just time to do those things.
But we caught Nick a good time in this one. I think he'd done some stuff with the Fringe recently. So, but he got a couple of songs, 3 songs that he wanted to submit for the album, and it's great material. You know, I think the thing is we know what will fit and what will not fit the Big Big Train world. I remember there's a song you've got which we recorded the strings for, Abbey Road, and you said to me, I'm not sure this is kind of a solo thing or a Big Big Train thing, and you know, in the end I think you felt it was more appropriate for a sort of solo release. So I think we know, all of us in the band know what will and won't work, and
we learned as well, haven't we, from past experiences where we've kind of put things out that have been not. Some of the material hasn't had the best. Big Big Train's maybe not the best opportunity for that material. Yeah. So, but you know, we're evolving, we're learning, we're living, and hopefully that's we can deliver appropriate product.
Yeah, we deliver what people want, but also what we want.
Yeah.
But if the stuff that doesn't work in the Big Big Train world, there are other outlets. Yeah.
Let's talk about each of the 9 songs on the album. The album opens with Novum Organum, written by you, Greg, with Nick. It's a short 2-minute introductory piece and comparatively stripped down instrumentally, but essentially seems to serve as a scene setter for what follows.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. The song actually is taken from, there was a song called Home Song, which I always fancied being the song at the end of the album. I was slightly anxious that David was going to come up with another great end of song album, because this Home Song was kind of the return home tune, so I was kind of glad that you didn't. So that was kind of destined fairly early doors in our conversations to be the last piece. So this being an album, you know, we are serious about our albums. We want our albums to feel like, you know, whole things rather than collections of songs. We thought it'd be nice to bookend the album, so we took some chords from Home Song, and initially I was thinking of just a piano vocal introductory piece, but I said to Nick, I don't know if you've got any sort of other drums on this, I don't know, and he listened to it and came back with these very beautiful percussive ideas.
He's got the thumb piano.
Yeah, he's completely kind of converted the song from something that was, you know, me bashing away on a piano not very well to really a lovely soundscape, and which is great, because you know it's that material being stretched and improved. But yes, it's a scene setter. It's a calm before the storm, I would describe it.
Because you'd open Folklore and Grimm's Pound in quite a rousing fashion in each case. You've gone really to the polar opposite with this as an album opener. Yeah,
we knew Alive was going to be a kind of rousing second track, so I just think it was that thought of just lulling people in a little bit before you then sort of kickstart your journey. So we just wanted to set the it's setting the scene of the rest of the album, I suppose.
And lyrically, you've managed to get from the ancient legend of the Pillars of Hercules all the way through to the Voyager spacecraft. That's quite a leap in time and space.
Sounds like a stretch, doesn't it? I think those two things are connected, though. I mean, the Pillars of Hercules, the title I stole from a book by Francis Bacon, and on the front of the book was a drawing of the Pillars of Hercules, sort of the legendary Straits of Gibraltar gates, if you like. And in classical times, those were apparently, well, the legend is that they were inscribed with words which said something like "nothing further beyond." So it was kind of the end of the world, or the edge of the known world, I suppose. And so the interesting thing for me was in the Francis Bacon book, which is in the 17th century, when the scientific revolution was coming along and the Enlightenment was beginning to happen. On his book, there was I'm paraphrased, but it was something like "many will travel and knowledge will be uncovered." So it was a reversal of that. It was, rather than "here be dragons," it was "here be knowledge." You know, as people need to travel to discover things. So I thought that was like a direct line, and we knew there was going to be a song about the Voyager spacecraft on the album as well. But that for me was a direct connection from 1620 through to 1977, when the scientists were designing and about to launch these ships that were going to go further than anyone's ever been before, or anything has ever been before that's been made by mankind. And to do, you know, that journey is all about seeking knowledge. So yeah, it seems a bit random, but I think there's a direct line between the two things.
The Kubrick thing, you know, in 2001, where the early man throws the bone up in the air, and then it becomes a space station. It's the same within a frame. It's suddenly that human history is the gulf of human history is, but in time and the universe, it's just that. Yeah.
And I know you've read extensively about the spacecraft, and we'll come on to that later on, but have you read the Francis Bacon book?
I confess I've dipped in. It's of its time, so I can't say it's bedside reading. It's kind of like 99p on Kindle or something. So if anybody fancies having a go, they can do so. It's very important book. I mean, he was the felt to be one of the originators of the scientific method. So and he was in that book. He was kind of laying out some of the parameters of what mankind was to become in terms of how we discovered things. But it's probably a bit over my head and a bit of its time as well. So now I can't confess to having read it cover to cover.
So after the relatively restrained start of Novum Organum, next song is Alive. David, it's very upbeat, both musically and lyrically, and probably Big Train at its most commercial.
Well, the C word. Commerciality. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's going to storm the charts, but I don't think it's going to be bothering the top 10 anytime soon. But I suppose it's catchy. It's fast. It's a rocker. It's an up-tempo thing. It's a Carpe Diem song. It's a call to arms. It's live life while we have it and seize the day. That's the message. Yeah, it doesn't hang about either.
No, it's accessible. I mean, it's going to be the single. Commercial, I'm not sure I'd use that word, but certainly it's our most up and atom kind of song, I suppose, for the album.
Do you think every Big Train album needs something that, if not commercial, is accessible, up and atom, as you say? Do you think that needs to be a staple fixture of every album amongst some of the more drawn out, elongated material?
I think it's getting the balance right, personally. I think there's a lot of long conceptual stuff on this album, and I think it's about having that contrast, as long as it sits well together. So we've got Alive, we've got the song called Theodora in Green and Gold, which again is a more accessible sort of 5-minute piece. But I think if the album was purely 15-20 minute pieces, it can make it, it can all feel a bit of a wall of sound, and I think it's good to have some light shades, some speed, and some dynamics, and some slower pieces as well.
And it's the thing of it's the old thing of pieces of music being as long as they need to be.
Yeah.
Not the idea of just inflating them and cut it and pasting them just simply because progressive music's supposed to do that. It's got to have a flow, and it's got to have a balance, and it's got to have a zen, regardless of the duration of the piece. It has to work.
You've mentioned in the sleeve notes for Alive that our time on Earth is finite. None of us here today is in the first flush of youth. Do you feel a real sense of urgency at this time in your life and in Big Train's career?
At the age of, I'm 53 at the moment, I'm very relaxed about all of that now, but I wasn't when I was younger, due to kind of family circumstances and things like that, particularly the death of my dad. That made me aware that time is finite. You've got to get things done. You've got to live life. That's one thing that I came away with. But no, as a 53-year-old man sitting here today, I actually feel in a good space, and I don't feel that time is running out. I'm far more accepting of it all than I was, and that's with age and experience and wisdom, hopefully.
And how significant a part in seizing the day was the experience of headlining the night of the Prog Festival in Loreley, Germany in July 2018?
It was an amazing thing. It was an incredible moment, really, in the band's history, because if you think about it, that was our first European show, and we'd gone out there and we were headlining the Friday night. And I was pleased that we went on last, because it's a beautiful amphitheatre, and you get the whole kind of natural light show of the world, the nightfall coming down. Also, that makes the lights far more noticeable than when you're playing in sort of the afternoon or something like that. So we got that was a real good thing for us. But of course, it's great. We've got a big stage. The audience were willing. They were raring to go. We were very different, very, very different from the other bands that were on in the afternoon. But that's a good thing. So we really kind of stood out. So we had a lot going for us. But also, we had to kind of draw from within us rather, to take the stage and command it. So it was extraordinary. We got good lights. Zab was able to do what she's show her skill as a lighting designer, and all of this thing kind of clicked into place. And Big Train kind of proved that we can headline these shows. We can put on a big show, and it was great. It was wonderful.
It's interesting because I saw Dave mention the other day, Dave Gregory, he, with all of his experiences in XTC, he actually says, I think he said to you straight after the show, it was a career highlight for him. So for all of us, it was an extraordinary evening.
It was a moment.
Yeah, it was. And
had you already conceptualised the Grand Tour as the next album before playing that show?
We had.
We had. A few months before that. I mean, it was in our minds when we were thinking about the album, but to actually go out and do it, the concept sounded good to go and play our first European show to be really in the cauldron, really. But I think it's good to immerse yourself in those experiences which are potentially challenging, but you learn from them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess you could say it's a bit outside the comfort zone for us, but that's not a bad thing. We rose to the challenge, and that's definitely a carpe diem thing, isn't it? We did it. It was a triumph. of people that saw it, bear witness to that. It's a good thing, and we do have live tracks from there, don't we? It's recorded, so
we'll be able to get some of that, both filmed and acoustically recorded, so we'll be able to get those out.
So that's maybe something for to be released and look for, something to look forward to as well.
Next song on the album is another one that you wrote, David, and a tribute to Leonardo da Vinci on the Florentine. It sounds as if it's been a lifelong inspiration for you.
Yeah, well, he's just an extraordinary person. Actually, a complete outsider in many ways. He was allegedly dyslexic. He wasn't educated in the same way that a lot of educated people of that time, his peers, were educated. In fact, people laughed at him because he wasn't. But he was one of the first people to be employing an empirical mind, an inquiring mind, where he used his eyes to discover things, like seeing is believing and investigating. So, and he had an insatiable curiosity. Interestingly enough, as well, he had great fame in his lifetime. He was treasured, and he lived a good long while as well, considering for those times. And interestingly enough, his fame has never diminished. In fact, if anything, it's grown. Extraordinary man, extraordinary mind, but saw things very, very differently. Against the norm, but again, it's this inquiring mind and an enlightened man. Quite literally a Renaissance man in every sense of the word.
I mean, he achieved an extraordinary amount during his lifetime and was a true polymath. Given you had such a wealth of material to draw upon or be inspired by, how did you decide which aspects of his life and work to include within the song?
Well, I went to see an exhibition of Leonardo drawings, and I love the notebooks, the codices. You get a real sense of his mind and the methodology behind the man, his thought process. You get a sense of the person. Because with the notebooks, there are things like shopping lists and things. There's little kind of life things. And that was really, really great. But also, towards the end of his life, they think he may have had some sort of a stroke. He was bedridden. He started to do drawings called the deluge drawings, where it would be black chalk drawings, and it would be like this torrent, this flood, and of course that links in with the stuff in Ariel, the tempest, the raging tempest and the storms, and it's very possible that Leonardo could have been depressed because he couldn't do the things. He was getting old. He was coming towards the end of his life. But also, he was called a Florentine. This is another thing about being not of your out of your country, in the sense that if he'd have remained in Florence, then he would just been Leonardo, wouldn't he? It's the fact he's in France and he is the Florentine, because he was identified as that. That was his. That's what they referred to him as. But again, very treasured individual. So that it's just a man like Leonardo at the end of his life. I remember looking at the pages of the codices, and I'm not far off them, because you can really get sent. You can get right in close, and you can see the things. You can see all the fine marks, and the touch of the master's hand on the pages, and he would have had no idea that now, that this was just, he just wouldn't be able to imagine something like this. So looking at this, pages that were written and drawn on, and ideas from the mind of Leonardo da Vinci at that moment, it's incredible. It's like time and knowledge and travelling over distance again. So again, it's just a different way of travelling, going on journey. These codices survived the upheaval of the Italian Renaissance, 2 world wars, umpteen upheavals and what have you. Yet they were prized.
The next song's Roman Stone, and it's the first of Grand Tour's 3 multi-part epics. Greg, you're a very keen historian, and on Roman Stone, you've chosen to seek to tell the story of Rome up to its fall in 476 AD. It's a huge story. How do you go about encapsulating it into one 13-minute song?
It's a bit prog, isn't it, I suppose? The story of Rome is massive in every respect of the word. It's massive in historical terms. So if you look at the founding of Rome in maybe 750 BC, and then the fall of Rome 1,200 years later, that would take us back to King Alfred. That's how long that Republican Empire was the sort of colossus of the European region. And of course, the Byzantine Empire, which was Rome in the east, continued for another 1,000 years. So it's just such a huge part of history. And what's more, it's a massive story geographically as well. And I was prompted to write the song from some visits that I've done. We did a show in Cumbria with Francis Dunnery, and I went to Hard Knot Roman Fort up there, which is the most obscure part of the Lake District you can imagine, guarding this beautiful pass. And then I went with my wife to Housesteads along Hadrian's Wall, another Roman fort. And then a couple of years ago we went to Istanbul, and we walked the Theodosian walls there. And at that stage I was thinking, we're a couple of thousand miles away from the north of England, and it's still the same civilization that is creating these defences, these constructions. So it was an astonishing undertaking. And that wasn't the end of the Roman Empire. It went into Mesopotamia, it went into Africa and into Germany, etc. So it's a massive subject in every respect. And all I could do in a song is to scratch the surface. So I attempted nothing else really than a really three-part telling of the story from the foundation through to the kind of heights of Rome, through to hopefully some pathos in the final section. Because when Rome fell, it really fell. It was an epoch-making event. One of the great events of history. And you had a city that was maybe had a population of 1 million people, way bigger than anything else at that time, was reduced to almost sort of ghosts within this circle of walls, farmers, and with these mighty ruins still sort of looming over them. So it's an incredibly interesting picture. In fact, if you go and see some of the art in Rome, you can see even into the 17th and 18th century, you still had a fairly pastoral existence there, with sort of the remains looming over them. So yeah, it's nothing other than scratching the surface, but at least hopefully it gives a flavour of the Roman story.
And would you like at some point to delve deeper into the Roman story, given you're only scratching the surface on Roman stone?
Yeah, I'm sure. I love the period. I've been interested in Roman history since I was 5 or 6 years old. I love the city. Italy is like a second home to me. So I'm certain if we do another album with songs that are about travel, then I'm sure there'll be more about Rome.
Musically, Roman Stone is the first song on the album to feature the Big Big Train brass band. David's songs on Grand Tour don't feature any brass. Yours do. How did you decide whether to include the brass or not?
It's just at the demos. As we're working the demos up, decisions are made about instrumentation. And in this, brass is featured very heavily in some of David's songs before, Folklore being a great example, where it's it's almost like the core. And I remember you writing that brass part, as central to the song. So there's no there's no rhyme nor reason to it really. It's just in my songs I could hear brass. In David's songs,
there's a few things I didn't want to just go to the same old when I was writing these things. I wanted it to be different. I also made a decision that I didn't want to use any brass, and I also made a decision that there wasn't going to be any flute either on these things, and because that's all right. There doesn't have to be. Or maybe there does. I don't know. But there's I do a bit of flute playing on Pantheon, and I do a bit on Roman Stone, don't I? Yeah. But it's not. It's it's just different. It's just just a choice. I'm not doing the same old. I've got to. There must be flute parts on this. No, it doesn't work like that.
Well, that brings us neatly on to Pantheon, which is the album's only instrumental and was written by Nick. Greg, your sleeve notes describe Pantheon as brooding, or the song as brooding, and a bid to convey the atmosphere and majesty of the building. Presumably the brass was, no pun intended, pretty instrumental in that.
Yeah, it was. The great thing about the brass is it can they move a lot of air, and you know, they can add real weight to the music. And when Nick demoed the song, he'd included some brass samples on there. So I said to him, you know, straight away, "Are we okay to get this arranged by Dave Desmond?" And he was very keen. So yeah, Dave's guys come in, slightly different way of playing for them. It's not the sort of colliery band sound. Again, we're sort of evolving our sound, so this is it's nice for them to be able to stretch a little bit. But the Pantheon itself, I don't know if you've ever been, but it's you know, from the outside, it's not a beautiful building. It's a you know, it's like a squat sort of structure almost, but it's a bit like, you know, it's like going into the TARDIS. It opens out into something really beautiful inside. So that musically is a kind of attempt to convey something with a long story and with a particular iconic look to it.
Did you have significant difficulty in resisting the temptation to add lyrics, given the building's extraordinary history?
Actually, no, because we had a lot of lyrics to write. There's a lot of lyrics on this album, so yeah. So I think if Nick had suddenly said, "Oh, actually, can we have some words?" I think I would have probably screamed at that stage. So
no, you didn't go there. I think it was always going to be an instrumental, which is great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm a singer. I don't mind not singing. It's a choice. Again, it's a choice. You know, the choice not to do something is a choice. Is a musical choice.
You've managed to slip some flute into Pantheon, though.
Well, kind of a bit sort of under you know, the arm of the
a bit of arm twisting.
I recorded it last week. It was really 11th hour, so you know, because I needed something.
I think it needed a bit of flutter. Flute gives a bit of flutter, and it's also, we're, you know, hopefully we're a very melodic band, and I think what you're good at with your flute parts is that there's melody there. It's not just effect. So yeah, but it was sort of an 11th hour request.
It was.
But to my ears, Pantheon's one of 2 tracks on Grand Tour that add a musical dimension to Big Big Train that I don't think I'd ever heard before. Is Pantheon a deliberate foray into jazz funk for Big Big Train?
It's just, well, Nick wrote it, so the thing is, the way we've always gone with this, and whoever writes it gets the say on it. If we thought it would be a good track to use. In fact, Nick submitted it, didn't he, a few years ago?
Yeah,
actually,
it's been waiting to find its.
And it's had a different title, and it was to do with another body of work we were making. So it's something that we thought, oh, that would make a really good thing. Yeah. It sounds bombastic. It sounds like it sounds heroic and majestic when it kicks in.
I would say it's more jazz fusion than jazz funk, though. I wouldn't describe it as funky, but I'd say it's definitely fusiony.
Yeah, it's fusion, yeah.
And I like fusion music, and Nick's influenced by Tony Williams and sort of and the Phil Collins of the mid-70s with Brand X. So having that influence in the band is really cool, I think.
And Danny's into Mahavishnu's as well, I think.
And it contrasts very strongly with the next song, Theodora in Green and Gold, which is a co-write between the two of you with Nick. How did that come about?
Well, Nick submitted it. I think he submitted a couple of things, didn't he? And we kind of honed in on that particular one. I think they came there just like track 1, track 2 type things, weren't they? That's what we sent. And we thought actually we could do some of this. So we did it in a similar way to when we worked with Rickard. That I wrote the melody, and then once the melody's kind of in place, and Nick's happy with it, you then write the words. It's just a way of it's a kind of big trainifying.
Yeah, I mean we live a long way apart. Even David and I live a couple of hundred miles apart, and obviously Nick lives in the States, so it's not easy for us to be we're not in a room together very often, and normally we're working on live stuff and rehearsing when we're in that room. Yeah. So we found this way well with Mead Hall with one of Rickard's tracks last time, and so we thought we'd repeat the procedure this time. It's
a way of bringing in different ideas and different influences, but also it's it's got where I put the words will be different. I know when we did Mead Hall, when I wrote the melody for that, Rickard said he wouldn't have put the melody where I put it, and that's the whole point, isn't it? Yeah. You know, that's the point of collaboration. But once the melody's down, it gives Greg a framework to be able to put the words on.
And it's a song that also finds Nick making his Big Train lead vocal debut. How did that come about?
Well, it just seemed to be a good, because he'd written the song. I thought it'd be a nice opportunity for him to do something, and so I think it's things like the middle, kind of sort of middle eight section. Not it's not an eight, but the middle section of the song. He comes in there, and it's great. Nick said as well. One of the things that we were, I suppose, with the success of Big Train, and it's been an opportunity. I guess it looks like we've got a few more albums in us, doesn't it? In the sense and the longevity, the success of the band is we're doing very well, and like with Folklore, like with Grimspound, the success of the band kind of dictates what we sort of need. So Nick wanted to be involved a bit more with the writing side, which he has been. And he's been very patient actually with that, hasn't he? Bless him, because he donated these songs, these ideas a little while ago, but also. We really got into, because we've been working together a long time now as a band, as a live band, and we enjoy the harmony side of it. So the singing and like sharing parts, that's where it came from. So it just seemed like a natural thing to go that way. And Nick's up for anything. He's great mental attitude, force of nature really, but very positive bloke and. Clever guy, talented guy, to turn his hands to it. So he's it worked. It worked. Why not?
Greg, this is the final part of your trilogy about ancient Rome. Was it a struggle to confine yourself just to 3 songs about Rome, given 1,200 years of history?
Oh yeah, I could easily have. I could have continued and hope to do more. But this was, this is a different aspect of Roman history. So it's after the fall of Rome, and so a different type of story, and a story about a very interesting woman called Theodora, who is kind of slightly lost to history, certainly in the English-speaking world. And I'd discovered her through. I attended this speech by Bettany Hughes, who's writing a book on Istanbul, and she was very fond of this character, who'd risen from actress, which in those days might euphemistically have been a prostitute, through to empress, and ruled with her husband Justinian as a equal ruler. And there was a time in the history of Constantinople when she was the sinew that really stiffened his backbone when there were sort of threats to his rule. So she's a fascinating kind of Boudica style character. Also, she had a kind of almost a social work element to her as well. She was she was a woman of her time, so I think we would find her a bit imperial for our tastes now, but certainly she cared for people too. So I knew I wanted to write about her, and it was a visit to Ravenna that gave me again, come back to what you said at the start. You want to write about a subject. What is the angle here? And I visited in Ravenna. There's these incredible mosaics, Byzantine mosaics, and in the Basilica di San Vitale, I think it's called, there's a mosaic of Justinian on one side of the apse and Theodora on the other side, and they're sort of looking at each other. And it's jaw-dropping stuff. They've been there for 1,500 years, and the colours are exceptional. So the minute I saw it, I thought, that's the angle I'm going to take. I'm going to write almost about the art as much as anything else. There's a little line about Sarah in there because we will view the world through songwriters' eyes, and our language will be music, and Sarah will have a different language, a very visual language. So there's a line in there about an artist. The line and the colour, I think, is the observation, and that was, I had sort of Sarah in my mind when I wrote that particular bit. So it's a bit of an art history thing too. But yes, anybody that hasn't been to Ravenna, I strongly recommend a visit. It's a fabulous place.
David, the next song is Ariel, based on Shakespeare's character from his play The Tempest. It's an extraordinarily ambitious 8-part song cycle. What prompted you to merge fact and fiction, colliding Ariel with Percy and Mary Shelley and Lord Byron?
Well, I was interested in the character, Ariel. I think it's a fascinating character. I like the fact that Shakespeare doesn't particularly explain kind of what Ariel is. It's supposed to be a sprite, and you see by the way Ariel acts within the confines of the play, what he's capable of doing and all that kind of business. But there's lots of things going on there with Ariel. And I just thought, well, it was just that the conceit is that, well, what actually if Ariel was real? And the thing that made me do that was just really researching stuff about Percy Bysshe Shelley and Mary Shelley and Byron over in Geneva and on their travels. And there's a bit where they are in Italy, and Percy Shelley likens himself to Ariel in a poem called "To Jane with a Guitar," where he casts himself as Ariel. And interestingly enough, the thing that really got it was when Lord Byron gave Shelley a boat called the Don Juan, which is a big epic Byron poem. But this is a very interesting thing, and this happened. Shelley, according to Mary Shelley, rechristened the boat Ariel, and then went out. Eventually, this was the boat that they would capsize in, and they were killed. Shelley and his crew were killed by a sudden Mediterranean storm, tempest. That was it. I thought, right, okay. So how did Shelley? How did that all connect? So that's why it took me so long to write it. It could have been a novel. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I thought, God, nobody's thought of this. I thought this is a no-brainer. So it just had to be done, and that was it. That's the story, really. So it kind of felt I had to connect. So if Ariel's real, then he tells. I did this thing called dreamings, by way of imparting information by way of dreamings. Pretty much sleeping bard. Ariel would impart the information into the sleeping bard, and he'd come up, wake as inspiration, as we often sometimes do, and we write things down. So then the Tempest comes, and of course, allegedly the Tempest is Shakespeare's last play, and it's to do with Shakespeare bowing out and leaving the stage. But also, is Ariel an immortal? Oh, I don't know, because it doesn't say. You just know. I didn't want to say and explain everything either. So then it's just a question of years later. The point being, I got this from a conversation I had with Judy Dybel. Her friend Jackie Morris did a book with Robert McFarlane, and I think it's called Lost Words. Is it Lost Words? Yeah. And Jude was saying that these words had been written to be recited aloud, And I was thinking about that, and I thought, like the music of the word, the delivery. And I thought, well, the idea of Prospero's magic and spells and storytelling, to be spellbound by a story as it's being told, you're casting these words into the air, so they are physically happening at you, and it's also creating the spell, like giving voice to it, saying it is where the magic is, that kind of thing. So I like the fact that, because Ariel's a spirit of the air, sounds are given into the air to pronounce these things, which to Ariel are just wonderful. That's like his medium, and so he responds to that. So the idea of Shelley being in a pine forest in Pisa, writing to Jane with a guitar, rehearsing the lines of these stanzas into the air, invokes Ariel. That's it. It's just a story. It's just a fantasy story. But I know it kept me busy.
Your sleeve notes refer to your research for the song. It sounds as if it was a significant undertaking in terms of time to put together.
Yeah, it's just so much of it, and particularly with the death of Shelley, the cremation. There's so many false accounts of it, there was a lot to work through, you know, kind of like to find something that would actually work. But so, you know, the song starts with Shelley's cremation, and it ends with that as well. The grieving Byron seeing something in the smoke in the pyre, but putting it down to the fact of grief and tiredness. Maybe one glass too many of laudanum.
Now that's just the lyrical side of Ariel. Musically, I would identify Ariel as being the other track alongside Pantheon, which is probably the most significant departure musically for Big Big Train, and is a fresh sound. How would you describe what you were trying to achieve musically with the song?
Cinematic, in one word. I was trying to make a movie. I was trying to write a soundtrack. That's what it was, and it was just given to telling the story, but completely given to it. So that's what it was. So the musical, once the different sections were in place and once the story was there, the musical sections were assigned, and I just wrote. Once I got the story down, once I knew what I got to say, it fell into place.
And the vocal harmonies are a key part of the song, aren't they?
They are, yeah, they are, yeah.
And you're fortunate to have several other great voices
exactly.
within the band.
Well, this is the thing. It's silly because, you know, we think about what it's an area of the band. I know. Going back to the Under 4 Yard, harmony vocals were a big part of that record. But when we started to play live, the harmonies were there, but maybe less so, I think, than they had been in previous albums. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting it kind of wrong. But now I'm thinking, well, actually, you know, we've got these things. It's silly not to be able. It's just something we can do. And another thing as well. One of my favourite bands are. I like Fleet Foxes a lot. They use a lot of harmony vocals in there. I like Fleetwood Mac. You know, I was interested in that, especially when big fan of Lindsey Buckingham, but I was kind of horrified and then delighted when they got rid of Lindsey. I thought, God, they can't get rid of Lindsey, but what are they going to do? And they got Neil Finn in. So suddenly in my mind, I'm thinking, right, wow, what would that sound like? So a bit of that was kind of me imagining, wanting to like toy with that musically and fit harmonies in.
And I suppose also with the Under 4 Yard, it was you layering up lots of your own vocals, whereas now you've got a greater wealth of talent to call upon. Yeah,
that's right, and it's good. It's just a different sound. It's something we can do, and it's something we enjoy doing, and it would be something we'd be silly not to explore it further. So it's just.
We've got 4 great singers in the band, and you know what's been good for me as an observer. I did sing a bit on the first set of shows that we did. Probably not a good idea, but as an observer, we've learnt doing the shows, and we've learnt actually the focus is on those 4 strong voices. And David will now write, you know, for the voices. You know, that's the thing. You know, whereas on the Under 4 Yard, it was, well, in fact, I didn't know that you wrote big vocal arrangements. So, you know, David was brought in initially as just the lead singer, and then we were presented with this complex vocal arrangement.
Trust me, we'll never have to play it live.
Never have to play it live, he said. I remember you saying that to me.
But, you know, it's been good. I like the fact that the Under 4 Yard was made that way. And when we played it live, that's why there's so many of us, because it's, you know, we tried to make big, adventurous, dramatic music. And that's what it took to deliver it.
So Ariel concludes on a beach and in the sea near Viareggio in 1822. Yes, it does. And then we head back to the 4th century BC initially, but ultimately then into space and indeed interstellar space with Grand Tour's penultimate song Voyager. And we're back to the spacecraft referenced in the opening song Novum Organum. Greg, tell me more about your fascination with Voyager and their mission.
The Voyager ships, we were both born in '65, and they were launched. I think we missed the kind of excitement of the moon landing bit because we were too young. I think that sort of petered out in the early '70s. So the Voyager ships were really, you know, exciting. This was kind of space 1999 days, and these Voyager ships, which were going a long way. In fact, the mission was originally configured as the grand tour of the solar system, which was kind of an irresistible link for me in any case. But they took off when we were 12 years old, and what was interesting about them was because the missions were so long that we were able to kind of touch base with them again during the course of their missions. So the primary mission ended after about a decade, so we'd gone from 12 years old to 22 years old in that period of time. But even then, from that stage when they'd gone past their last planets, they were sent out to reach the edge of the solar system, to travel into interstellar space, which is an incredible idea for me. So, I was thinking about, I like the Grand Tour connection. I was thinking about this ability that mankind has to harness tools and machines to really seek, knowledge and to go further. And for me, the Voyager missions are probably two of the most exciting stories that we'll ever tell. One of the amazing thing about them is that they're both now in interstellar space. Voyager 2 left only in November, so I'd already done the sleeve notes for their song, and I had to change them because at that stage I thought it was just about to leave interstellar space, but it left interstellar space, entered interstellar space. But the thing is, those spacecraft, space is really big. Those, we're in the Royal Astronomical Society here, and the men and women here have helped to define quite how extraordinarily large space is. And those ships will be out there for hundreds of millions of years, and they're not likely to bump into anything. So as well as being an interesting story, it's one of the longest, or probably the longest story mankind will ever tell. And what the conceit in the song is that they are on a galactic orbit now, and they will return to, within a few light years probably of the solar system. So they kind of will come home. And I thought that was an incredibly sort of romantic story. And there's real heart in those spaceships. When you're launching a spacecraft, people will have the job of getting the spaceship into space, and then there'll be a different team of engineers doing something else, and et cetera, et cetera. And there's a bereavement process, and it's interesting if you talk to or look at some of the documentaries about these spaceships and others. When people put their souls into these machines, and once their involvement with them is ended, there is a grieving process. They're incredible things. So if anything's worthy of a tune, I think the Voyager ships are.
And it's Voyager that completes a trilogy including East Coast Racer and Brooklands. How did you go about writing another lengthy song about humans and machines while ensuring no musical repetition?
Yeah, it was one thought I had was whether we should actually draw in some musical ideas from those other pieces. But I think it's good that they sit, they're all different. They're all based on the same idea, but they're all different parts or aspects of that idea. So I thought for me, as with David and the rest of us in the band, writing is what we do, and it's not difficult to, it can be a struggle, but it's not difficult to think of new musical themes and tunes. So I decided it would be a piece on its own. At some stage, we may, configure the three pieces and write some incidental music around them. But right now, it sits as the end part of a trilogy.
Not every Grand Tour rite of passage involved a return by the traveller to their home. But with the last song on the album, your Grand Tour does so on Home Song with a return to England. Why was that?
I love travel, but I also like to travel knowing that I will go home at the end of it. I'm a bit of a home bird, I suppose. And I don't feel at home until I've gone out and kind of trod the landscape, if you see what I mean. So I've got a little kind of ritual. I live near the River Stour, I have done for 25 years. And when I come home after a trip, whether we're out, gigging or whether it's just a holiday or whatever, I'll go and walk by the river. And then I feel home. And you, of all people, understand this connection to the sort of landscape. Yeah. So, for me, that's when I'm home. I can hear the bird song. I can hear the river and see the wildlife and the landscape. And so I just thought for this album we wanted to come home at the end of it, and everything lyrically is an observation that's been taken from the Stour or from parts of England, Gloucestershire, Warwickshire, Wiltshire. So it's it's me out and about, walking, just taking note of what I've seen, really.
The song builds from just some guitar and Rachel's violin to a very rich arrangement. With such an array of musicians at your disposal within the band, how do you decide what to include or exclude within the arrangements?
Yeah, it is an embarrassment of riches sometimes, especially as everyone's got a melodic ear, so there's an awful lot of melody coming through in everyone's parts. And we've been, we have to prune sometimes. There's different versions of these songs where parts hit the cutting room floor, because sometimes you have to strip things out to hear the core bits and pieces.
Let things breathe.
Yeah. Sometimes we we like lots of depth and detail in our material, but other times it's good to have that, that sort of cleaner soundscape, I suppose. So yeah, it's just, in fact, in this particular song, top tip: always record more than you need to. We were able to, because Nick played a bit more, and the brass played a bit more than was expected, so we were able to kind of lengthen the song slightly, because there was Dave Gregory put in a really nice guitar solo, and David was singing at the same time, and I thought they needed a bit of space, so we were able to extend it to accommodate that.
And the climax of Home Song makes stunning and highly evocative use of the big train brass band. Is this their finest hour?
I hope so. I think it's certainly up there. It's been a good experience for me, this one, because when I demoed it, I could hear the brass. The first part of the song was a fairly brisk kind of musical idea, and then I could hear it coming into this sort of brass apotheosis where we sort of had this quite rousing theme. So that, at the demo stage, it was, I thought, is this going to work? Is this going to get all the way through to the final recording? There's always a problem with demos. Sometimes they just don't. Sometimes you capture magic in the demo, and it doesn't, it just doesn't quite make it. So we recorded the brass, and I thought, yeah, okay, this is working for me. Dave Desmond's arrangement is beautiful on it. And then when we started to get the mixes through a couple of weeks ago, I thought, yeah, okay, there's a bit of bottom lip tremble there, I think, and it does what I want to hear from the brass band, to add that sort of extra bit of musical weight and depth that they do. And yeah, hopefully it'll be, the feedback we've had from you're one of the first people to hear it, has been very positive, and yeah, hopefully it will touch people.
Let's talk about the artwork. Sarah, what was your reaction to the concept of Grand Tour when it was first presented to you by David and Greg?
Well, I knew that Second Brightest Star was the last instalment in the Albion trilogy, if you like. So I knew that they would be casting their net further afield. And, the band are great storytellers, so it seemed a natural progression that they would, venture out into the world. And for me, that's great, because it just provides me with much more inspiration.
Sarah, there's a vast array of people, places and physical objects featured on Grand Tour. Is that a benefit or a burden to you as an artist?
No, it's a benefit. It's a benefit, because it's just more material to draw on, more stories to draw inspiration from. So it, as much material as possible. That's always the best thing.
And did much hit the cutting room floor or the artist's equivalent?
Oh, I don't talk about that. Yes, some did, some didn't. Some did, but I had quite a strong concept for the artwork on the album, so I played around with a few ideas, and some things fitted well, and some things didn't. But that's part of the process, isn't it?
I mean, to my amateur eyes, your artwork is simultaneously both recognisably by you, but also represents a departure from what you've produced for the band previously since you started working with them from Folklore onwards. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a difficult question for me to answer, really. I think that's better answered by a third party, because style is a difficult thing for me to identify because it just comes naturally. That's just how I handle the brush. I think that we're dealing with different subject matter here, so obviously the imagery is going to change a little bit. I think all the time I'm always trying to push myself, push the work that I do, improve it, make it better. So there should be a natural progression, and there is musically as well. You know, the band are always trying to push forwards, and the same thing happens with the artwork. So I think that's quite normal that you should feel a slightly different temperature from it. But yeah, hopefully it's still recognisably mine.
Tell me about your cover painting.
When I met with Greg and David to talk through initially the concept for Grand Tour, one of the themes that we kind of stripped back a lot of the stuff on the album to look at kind of core themes. And one of the themes that we hit upon was the idea of things which we create, which remain long after we have departed. And you know, Greg's song about Voyager, I think, represents that concept a little bit. You know, long after we are gone, things still remain. And I took that idea away with me and mulled on it for a little while. And because a lot of the album was set around Italy, I started to look at the different statues and gods that were revered at that time. And the cover image is of Apollo. He seemed to fit that concept perfectly, and also he was the god that represented music and creativity and travel. And so I presented the idea to the band of having Apollo on the front cover. We started off looking at actual statues of Apollo, but we decided that it would be better if we had our own. So we created our own Apollo.
Is that difficult when there's so much to look at and derive inspiration from? Is it difficult to come up with a fresh, unique take?
Well, you know, that sort of thing is shaped by the confines of the kind of product that you're producing at the end of the day, the fact that it was a CD cover or an album cover. I've always wanted to go for one strong image. So, you know, I had to think about how I would, you know, edit it, if you like, how it would be, the image would be cut. And then I had to find someone to model for me.
For some reason you reject my...
Yeah, funny, isn't it? But you know, there's some other little influences in there as well. Apollo's hands on the lyre is kind of my own personal little nod to Jura's praying hands. So there's other little Renaissance influences in there as well.
And how long does it take you to produce a piece of art like do you know, can you put it into number of hours, days, weeks, months?
It's really difficult to quantify. Each piece is different. It goes through a sketching development process. Then I'll get to a point where I'm able to knock up a rough for the boys to sign off on, and then final execution just depends. Sometimes it comes together really quickly. Sometimes it's as painful as giving birth, you know.
And is it obvious to you when something's finished, or is there the temptation that there's always a bit more you can do? Do you have to be disciplined and know when to draw a line?
And that's something that I've learned over the years, not just with album artwork, but artwork across the board, is you have to know when to stop fiddling and to walk away, because you'll ruin it.
And is that just a gut feel?
It's a gut feeling, yeah.
Within the artwork, there are a number of paintings of images and people, some of which will be less familiar Theodora, the Roman umbrella tree, for example. There are others, Leonardo da Vinci, the Colosseum, the Pantheon in Rome, which are immediately recognisable. How do you approach presenting a well-known image in a fresh way?
Well, in this instance, so as I said before, there was a strong concept for the artwork on the album, and one of the things I wanted to do with the booklet was to present it a little bit like a journal, so somebody who had taken their grand tour. So I thought it would be a nice idea to consider this individual might have visited these different places and they might have journaled their experience through some quick washy watercolours, so quite loose, not particularly detailed, and so that the concept drove how they would be executed, how they would be depicted. So with the watercolours, so it's primarily watercolour, the booklet, watercolour, a little bit of ink, a little bit of pencil, but I made sure to research pigment, so there's nothing in there that wouldn't have been appropriate to the time when grand tours were most popular, so around sort of 1848 to 1870. Now that level of detail probably is lost on everybody else, but I quite like that kind of,
But it's got the
authenticity
integrity of authenticity for you.
And I like that kind of thing. That pleases me.
And it's also, as well as the band venturing into pastures, territories new, it sounds as if, certainly for your work with Big Big Train, you've employed new techniques.
Yes. As I was saying, I quite like that thorough authenticity of going back and looking at techniques and mediums which are appropriate to the timescale which is being discussed. So in this instance, the front cover is created using sanguine, red chalk, white chalk, charcoal, and those are exactly the mediums which Leonardo used, which Dürer used. As I said, the watercolours are the correct pigments. The dip pen lyrics, which are pulled out in the booklet, they're executed in oak gall ink. I'm sure it doesn't make any difference to anybody.
Well.
And the front cover was produced on vellum, so I'm sure it doesn't make any difference to anybody else. But I like it. It makes me happy.
Yeah.
And you've also incorporated a number of visual callbacks to previous Big Big Train artwork, including the infamous telescope that accompanies the lyrics to Alive.
Yeah, what telescope? Yes, I have. I think callbacks are something which Big Big Train do brilliantly. So you'll often come across lyrical callbacks or phrases of music which are callbacks to previous albums, and I wanted to replicate that in the artwork because I think they're clever, because they allow the art or the music, the album, to stand alone, but they also allow it to slot into a wider body of work, the larger body of work. And the callbacks are there if people can spot them and understand them, and if they can't, that doesn't matter, But I think it's a little nod to people in the know, I suppose.
And to what extent is your design influenced by the CD or vinyl format, and how difficult is it to adapt? Because happily, Grand Tour is coming out on vinyl as well as on CD.
Well, the artwork has a job to do. It has to be fit for purpose. It has to fit into the format. Whilst it's a wonderful indulgence to know that the work's being released on vinyl, the fact is, or you might correct me here, I might be wrong, but I'm guessing that the majority of physical sales of physical product are on CD. Yeah. So it all needs to work on CD first and foremost. So whilst it's nice to get nice and detailed in the gatefold, it still has to replicate well on a much smaller scale, so I have to bear that in mind.
Presumably, as an artist, though, you have a particular affinity and affection for vinyl.
Yeah, absolutely I do, because, you know, personally, I'm inspired by all those artists from yesteryear that produced such fantastic pieces of artwork, you know, obviously Roger Dean, but for me, Patrick Woodroffe is a huge influence of the stuff that he produced for Palace. So now producing work that ends up on vinyl on a gatefold is you know, ambition tick.
And there is some adaptation, presumably, that you need to bear in mind as to how something's going to translate from the CD format to the vinyl format. Is that particularly challenging?
It is a little bit challenging, but we've got a really good designer called Steve who sorts all of that out. So he's very patient with me, so I just provide him with things, and he takes on the headache of having to, you know, fit it into the right format.
For the band, musically and lyrically, Grand Tour is the most ambitious piece of work yet. As far as album artwork that you've produced, does Grand Tour fit into the same category?
Yes, it probably does, actually. When you're creating something which depicts the human form, you have to get it right. You know, people will spot immediately if there's something that's slightly off. Previously, when I've produced a lot of wildlife imagery for the band, you can kind of get away with things with that. But also the gatefold on this particular album was quite a challenge because I was trying to meld the two different ideas from David's opus aerial into one image. So that was quite a challenge as well, but got there in the end, I think.
Let's talk about the live side. It's not quite a grand tour into continental Europe, but you're playing a 6-date tour of the UK in October and November this year. Why are you undertaking a proper UK tour now for the first time in the band's lengthy existence?
Because we can, really. The audience is there for us. We've been cautious. You know, we're trying to make a living from this, so it's a big deal for us to. You know, it's an expensive band to put out on tour because there's 13 of us on stage. So everything that surrounds it,
food and lodgings.
Yeah. It's, you know, so we've been very careful, and as you know, we played 2 sets of London shows in the same venue to kind of test the water. Then the Lorelei experience to test really getting out on the road.
Yeah, moving us around.
Yeah, so we've been, you know, business-like and careful about it. Now we believe the audience is there for us to. We're onto a UK tour. We've booked some fairly big venues, and I think at this stage it's early doors, but I think at least 4 of the 6 venues will be sold out. So I think we've pitched it about right.
And the time is right to do it, you know, because it's one of those kind of if not now, then when.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's one of those kind of things. We're ready to do it.
Yeah, and we're planning the getting out into the wider world in 2020 as well.
The album Grand Tour has a flow to it. How much of it do you anticipate playing live?
We haven't fully settled the set list yet, but I would think at some stage I'm sure we'll play all of it. But I think for the next couple of years we'll probably play half of the album live, I guess, and then we'll. It's important to feed in back catalogue material. People are seeing us for the first time. A lot of people seeing us are there for the first time, so you know that I think we've got a responsibility to play some of the favourites for them as well. So yeah, I guess about half for the next couple of years, but at some stage I think all of it will be in the live set.
Given the body of work that Big Big Train's built up over the last decade since the release of the Underfall Yard, it must be increasingly difficult to choose a set list.
Yeah, we've done.
It's a good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have. Yeah, well, you know, it is a lot of work over the last 10 years because our albums are not, you know, they're not 70s length albums. They're not 40 minutes. They're generally sort of an hour or more. Yeah. And so there is over, I think, 7 studio albums I think we've done. There's in the last decade, there's a lot of material there. I think a lot of it's good stuff as well.
I like the fact we do rotate the songs. It's just good. It keeps it fresh, you know. And certain songs as well. Sometimes when we played them for a few times, you think, well, actually, yeah, this was feeling a bit tired. Maybe rest this one, and it gives room for something else. So it's best not to get too sort of too precious about it, and kind of go with what's working at the time, because that's just go with the feel of it.
Are there any sacred cows that you don't feel you can put out to pasture?
If we're being honest, if I may say so, Greg, I think Greg and I are quite, you know, we're not particularly wedded to anything in particular. I think it's not about that. I think it's more about what the fans, probably from the fans' point of view, that's where those things would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's our duty is to entertain the audience primarily, and so therefore, yeah, we need to think about what we want to play, and also what people want to hear.
I'm going to paraphrase it. There's a great Bill Bruford quote. I'm sure I'm misquoting him when I say it, but it's pretty much he says that the fan wants yesterday, the musician wants tomorrow. So it's always going to be that. We always, you know, we want to go, oh, look what we've done. Yeah. You know, let's do this. Look, you know, we want to show it off. But we do realise that people like to, you know, go and it's like, I guess it's like going to see Bob Dylan. He doesn't play Blowing in the Wind or Mr. Tambourine Man. You know, you're going to be, feel somehow that, why didn't he play it? Yeah, but I don't know.
When you made the Under Full Yard, you had no conception that you would ever need to play any of that album on stage. With Grand Tour, have you made it on the basis that ideally you'd like to play all of it on stage at some point, and therefore it needs to be something that is achievable?
We don't. I think if we needed a song to be unachievable live, then it's the song is the thing. So I don't think we'd shy away from saying actually this is a studio production. But there is a natural tendency now to think anything we do may be in the live set. I mean, what we don't know, of course, is what people will like on the new album. So we think maybe this one will be good this time, but maybe it'll be something completely different that people are asking for. So I think definitely all of Grand Tour is playable, but there would be some songs, certainly Aerial's a good example, which will challenge us more than others.
That would be tricky to do, but that's part of it. You know, as Nick would say, bring it on. He's very, it's being up for it. It's not insurmountable, and there's a lot of us in. You know, it's not like we're like a 4 or 5 piece band. I think we've got a lot of people to hand. You know, to be able to carry this stuff off. We're lucky in that respect. Blessing and a curse, isn't it? It's a rod. We've made a rod for our own backs, but it's extraordinary, and that's why it's different, and that's good. That's done us a lot of good, really.
In 2018, for the live shows, you delved back into the era before David joined the band by playing Summer's Lease live. Do you anticipate reviving further material for live performance from the pre-David era?
I don't have that itch to scratch, really. Summer's Lease, although it's before David, it was the first song you heard from Big Big Train. So there was a sort of a.
It's a great song.
It was rooted in David's introduction to the band. Anyway, there's a couple. I mean, there are some older songs that I think would be. I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to hear them performed by our lineup of the last 10 years, but I'm not particularly thinking in terms of set list, let's go back and introduce something from, I don't know, Bard or something like that. I think they'll probably stay historical, but you never know. You know, we'll see. We will do. Hopefully, you know, the future of the band will revolve at least partly around touring, and that may lead us to dig deep. Sometimes we'll see.
And particularly while we're able to make the quality of work that we just done with the Grand Tour, you know, it's we've got stuff to do. We've got new things to do, and we are a progressive rock band after all. So let's keep it eyes forward, and all that. But it's good. It'd be silly to be wading too much into the past. I think. I mean, I don't know.
No, I agree with that.
Greg, David, Sarah, thank you very much.
you.
Thank you.